하고 있습니다. 그 좀 양해 좀 부탁을 드리도록 하겠습니다.
Hello, can you hear me okay? Yes? Okay. I have no idea what was just said, by the way. I hope it was good. It is an honor and privilege to be speaking here. I want to thank the committee for inviting me to come speak, and thank you for taking the time to come listen to me. My name is Russ Wilson. I'm with Google, and I'm going to talk about the top 3 problems in UX and a little bit about how to solve them. But before I do that, I'm going to give you a little bit about me, because you may have never heard of me, you may not know who I am. I grew up in South Texas, right on the border of Mexico. This is closer. Oh, is that better? Yeah. Here, I need to go up a little bit. I grew up on the border of Mexico, which is like traditional cowboy land, like what you would think of as cowboy land. It's kind of funny. And then moved to Austin, Texas, where I went to school, and finally Seattle, where I live today, working for Google. This is my family, my wife, my daughters, my dog, female. Everyone's female but me. That's a good thing, by the way, because they keep me in line. So a little bit about my career. So I got my undergrad in computer science and my master's in software engineering from the University of Texas in Austin. My first job out of school was at IBM. After about a year, I left IBM and I started my first startup. I bootstrapped the startup, meaning I paid for it with my own money and got it going up to about a $5 million run rate a year, and then sold it. I was 23 at the time. I decided I wanted to try another startup, and I founded another company. And this time I went the venture capital route, and I raised $2 million in seed funding and launched a product company. It was not successful. I learned a lot from it. It was very hard, but it was a great experience. I left that, and I joined another company that someone I had met had founded called NetQOS, and I joined as Vice President of Design. And within 4 years, we grew that company from 30 people to about 300 people, and we sold it for $200 million. And I'll talk a little bit about what we sold in that company later on. We sold the company to CA Technologies. And when they acquired us, they made an offer for me to stay on as Vice President of UX. I took it because I'd been in startups for so many years that I wanted some experience in a bigger company. And I stayed there for 3 years, and I was promoted to Senior Vice President of UX for CA Worldwide. I left CA to join IBM as IBM's first design executive, where I had an organization of about 200 people, and then I founded the Mobile Innovation Lab. I left IBM to join Microsoft as head of design for Power BI. I built a team in 4 months and launched a product in 8 months that wound up in Gartner's leadership quadrant. And then finally went on to Google, where I was recruited to be the head of design for Google Cloud. I have a very large organization at Google. It's a little unusual. We typically don't do huge organizations, but I have 320 full-time designers and researchers reporting up into me, and about 60 contractors. I'm responsible for design across all of Google's cloud. It's about 120 products. So last year, I was invited to speak at a conference, and the topic I chose was the top 3 problems in UX. And I came up with 3 problems myself, and then I decided that it'd be more interesting if I reached out to other leaders at other companies and got their opinion. So I collected the top 3 problems from maybe 15 different leaders at different companies. And I compared theirs to mine, and I wound up creating the final list of the 3 that I picked. For this conference, I chose to do the same topic, but I updated it. I did the whole process again, and I went back to different leaders, some of the same leaders, vice presidents at Uber, at Amazon, at Facebook, within Google, and I came up with a new list. One of them is the same as last year, but the other 2 are new. And that's what we're going to talk about. So here's the list. 3 problems. The first is we don't work with users enough. It is shocking to me how little designers and engineers in the field, practitioners, actually work and meet with users on a regular basis. But let me ask you this. I know some of you are students, some are practitioners in the field. How many of you agree, and be honest, how many of you agree that working with users and customers regularly is important to do great design work? Raise your hand. Not many, maybe like 10. You guys don't believe that, huh? I'm gonna have my work cut out for me. I'm gonna have to convince you. Well, how many of you actually do that? Meet with customers and users on a regular basis? I asked that same question at a conference in Austria about 3 months ago. Everyone in the room raised their hand for the first part, and no one in the room raised their hand for the second part. It's really amazing. Now, how we work with users depends on what our goal is. Innovation is very, very different from improvement, right? In innovation, you're trying to make a leap to something new that you didn't see, something around that next corner that you can't really grasp right now. In improvement, you're basically refining a product and making it better and better over time. Let's talk about innovation for a second. So, if you look at these examples, no one asked for the products on the right-hand side, right? I mean, I had a flip phone at one time. Maybe some of you are too young to have had a flip phone. I don't know. But I did not have a horse and carriage, though. Let's be clear about that. But I had a flip phone. I never thought about having an iPhone, right? I thought about incremental improvements I could make, like maybe a better battery, sleeker design, better screen, you know, whatever it may be. But I never thought of the thing on the right. And it's true of the horse and buggy, too. People asked for, to make it less bouncy over bumps and better harnesses for the horse, but they never asked for a motorized vehicle, right? And that's because most of us don't know what we want yet, right? We really don't. It's hard for us to see around that corner and see what's possible and what could be coming. So the bottom line, one point I want to make very clear is that users can't innovate for us. I meet with a lot of companies and a lot of designers and a lot of leaders who say, well, we're going to innovate by working with our users. And the reality is that's very difficult to do for the reasons I just talked about, right? They can't really tell us what they want yet. And part of the reason for that is that humans, people, are very good at adapting to poor tools. You ever notice that? Like, I do it all the time. I use tools in my house that were not meant for doing something, but I'm very impatient. And I'm trying to get something done that I want to get done, and I'll use whatever I can find. And it's okay. I'm fine with that until you show me a better tool. Users do the same thing, right, with our products. And I'll show you an example in a minute to kind of drive that point home. Another thing is that we can't expect our users to be experts in our domain, in technology, right? They're experts in their domain. If you have a customer that's in banking, they know all about banking, but they don't know about technology. And innovation happens at the intersection of domains. Most of us are involved in technology, so it's usually technology plus something else. Think of Uber, right? Mobile technology, a platform, and a taxi service. And they revolutionized that industry, right? That's an innovation. But they are very good, users are very good at helping us make products better. And that's because they bring their goals, they bring their needs, they bring the context, the environment they work in, any constraints that they might have, and we synthesize all those things along with our knowledge and our expertise in technology and design into possibilities, potential solutions, right? That's what's so valuable about working with users on a regular basis. You can't improve something you don't use. You know, several years ago, we were doing some work on our house. And we had hired some masons to build a limestone wall around the backside of our house. And they did an amazing job, and they worked around the clock. I would watch them, and they were just very good at their job. So I wanted to get them something. So I went to the store, and I found the best, most expensive, most beautiful, in my opinion, masonry hammers. They were all steel. They were just, the design was gorgeous. It had a blue handle, and I bought 5 of them, right? They were very expensive. And I took them back to the Masons, and I gave them to the Masons as a gift and said, thank you so much for your hard work. I want you to have this. The next day, I looked outside, and they weren't using those hammers, right? And I thought, well, that's a little weird. And then I wondered, well, maybe it's because they're too nice. I don't know, maybe they're afraid to use them, right? And so I asked their boss, when he came by, I said, why is no one using the hammers? And he said, they don't like them. And I was like, why don't they like them? He said, because they're steel. When they hit rock, the vibration hurts their hand. They like to use old wooden hammers because the wood absorbs the shock. I would never know that, right? I was just responding to a hammer that looked good, but I had no idea what it was like to really use it. If you aren't a user of a product, the only other option you really have to really have a big impact on it is to be very, very close and work very tightly with a user so you can develop the empathy and understanding of what their challenges are and how they're trying to use the product. So a couple of stories about why I love working with users. Citibank. And this goes back to the comment I made about people are really good at adapting to poor tools. I was at a company, and we had a very large customer, Citibank, which is a big financial company. And one day I asked if I could go visit them. And we had account managers, we had sales teams, we had a lot of different people who were working with Citibank and were coming back and telling us what Citibank wanted, what new features, what was important to them. But I still wanted to meet with them. And so I flew to New York, and I met with some of the managers, and then I asked them if I could come back the next day and shadow one of the users that was using our product. And they said, sure. And they found somebody who agreed to it. I showed up the next morning at 8 a.m. with 2 cups of coffee. I gave one to the lady that I would be shadowing. I tried to make her comfortable with me being there. And she started using the product, and I just watched her. And what I noticed was that the product was a tool that would create charts and graphs about network traffic in different ways, right? So she would plug in some variables, and she would generate a chart. And then she would hit Control Print Screen, and then she would, to screenshot the page, and then she would go into Microsoft Paint, crop out the chart, and then she would put that into a PowerPoint slide deck. And she did this like 15 or 20 times. And I turned to her and I said, what are you doing? And she said, well, my boss doesn't use your product. He only looks at PowerPoint slides. I have to show him these charts, so I've got to get him out of your product and into a slide deck. I went, oh my God. I go, have you ever told anyone that? She goes, no, it's just the way I do it, right? And I'm like, okay. So I go back home, I go back to our office, and I work with the developers, and I tell them, what if we just put a copy to clipboard button on every chart we create, every graph, so that when a chart pops up in the product, you can just hit a button, the chart is copied to the clipboard automatically, they can go and hit Control V and paste it into a PowerPoint slide. We did that, and something like 60 customers reached out to us and said we had solved a problem that had huge impact for them. Sales never mentioned this. Account management never mentioned this. Product management never mentioned this. And it wasn't really their fault because none of the customers actually complained about it. They had adapted to use it that way, and it's a poor tool. But it took meeting with them just to find this small thing that actually had a lot of impact to the way they were doing business and using our products. The University of Louisville. So several years ago, I was looking at CNN, a news network, and I saw an article about a research team at the University of Louisville who, by mistake, or maybe by luck, had discovered a way to restore some movement to victims of paralysis, patients who had been paralyzed. Long story, it's very complicated, but it was this amazing discovery. I was running the Mobile Innovation Lab at the time, and so I reached out to the University of Louisville and to the head researcher and asked if I could come visit, maybe find a way to help, right? Maybe I could add the people in my Mobile Innovation Lab to this effort because it seems so amazing. She said, okay. I flew out. I asked her where we were going to meet, where her office was. She said, we're not going to meet in my office, we're going to meet in the hospital, the research hospital where the patients are. And so, before I had gone anywhere, straight from the airport to the hospital, I sat down with this gentleman who's sitting there, and he's actually paralyzed from a particular vertebrae down. The woman in front of him is one of the researchers, and there's more researchers in the back. And what you see on the right-hand side is the implant, an electrical implant that provides a certain stimulus that restores some movement, right, for these patients. And we spent the entire afternoon and day with this patient and other patients, and we saw how they work the facility, how they train patients to adapt to this electrical stimulus, all the challenges the researchers had. And by doing that, by being in that environment, we developed a lot of empathy for both the researchers and the patients in their daily challenges. And as a result, we created a set of products for them that really helped them do their job better, right? But it was the time, it was spending the time in the field with these patients, with these users, really understanding how they do things that helped us create such a great solution. Now, there are challenges to working with users. It's easier said than done, right? For example, at Google, I had to hire a user recruiter, someone who is full-time that will help us find, because it takes so much time to schedule, and these are your customers, right? So you have to be very careful. You can't demand anything, you have to ask. And so we would get customers canceling on us. I had my researchers working to try to schedule these things, and it was taking away from their job. And so I hired a full-time person just to help us with recruiting our customers, so we could do we could meet with them more often. There's all sorts of concerns with sales and account management and marketing that we're going to say something that's going to upset a customer, right? There's a lot of concerns, but all these things can be overcome. And the value in just, spending time with a person, with a human, to understand what their challenges are, it can't be undermined. All right, problem number 2. We don't always work on the right things, even when we think we are. I encounter this all the time at Microsoft, at Google, at IBM. I go to companies, I get hired at companies typically to build a new team up or to restructure something. And this is one of the biggest problems I see every single time. And this was reported by many of the leaders that I pointed out at those different companies that I listed. There are many types of different wrong things that we work on, right? For example, I call this one the idealistic wrong thing. Shortly after I joined Google, Urs Holzle, if you've heard of him, he was employee number 8, and very, very wealthy man, and he was responsible for all of Google's architecture in the cloud, everything that runs Google search. Urs was the person that designed and developed that. And he was one of the people that hired me to Google. And he sent me an article, and it was a post-mortem from a startup founder, and he asked me to read it, and he wanted my opinion. And what the startup founder wrote down was that they had invested heavily in design. They had done everything like you're supposed to do. They did user research, they did design iterations, they did prototypes, they validated all their assumptions, they created an extremely consistent product. Conceptual integrity was beautiful across their whole suite of products, and they went bankrupt. They failed. They went out of business. And the reason was that his competition was chasing features and customers while he was trying to make it perfect, right? Now, that's a hard one because I want to make things perfect as a design leader. That's my inclination. It bothers me when things are inconsistent. But you can't be too idealistic. You have to think about the real world, right? We are in businesses. We are in companies. It's very important to not get, blinded by kind of this, what you're supposed to do by the book, right? The solution without a problem, wrong thing. I see this a lot too. At the startup that I joined, the one we sold, they had two products, Super Agent and Reporter Analyzer. And Super Agent was the product they loved. The founders had created it, they had filed patents on it. It was innovative. It did something in a new way. What it basically did was, if you had a complex network, and if something slowed down on that network, this product would help you understand what was causing the problem, right? Reporter Analyzer was, in their opinion, not such a cool product, not all that special. All it really did, it was based on what a customer asked for, and it took data coming out of these NetFlow routers that Cisco makes, and it made real pretty reports out of that data. Made something really nice, right? And customers liked that because there was no other way of getting that report. The company doubled down on Super Agent and almost went bankrupt, almost went out of business. It turned out that getting to the root cause of a problem, for customers was not a problem they cared about. It was easier for them to reboot machines or to just buy additional hardware. If something's running slow and we have 2 servers running it, we'll run 4 servers. It was very easy for them to procure more equipment. So every argument we had against why they shouldn't do that was really not an issue for them. And so they didn't care, and they didn't buy the product. But the other product, the one we didn't care about, took off like crazy. And we wound up selling the company for $200 million for Reporter Analyzer. Just a simple reporting tool, right? The not how it's used wrong thing. This one is really tough. I had 2 leaders, one from Salesforce and one from Amazon, tell me that we need to create a group to come together and really tackle this problem. In fact, this almost became one of the major problems, even though it's kind of a sub-problem in here. The idea is that for some companies and for some products, have you ever heard of the term, we ship our organization chart? It's a term that reflects the fact that the way we organize within a company is sometimes around features, like you're seeing here, security, storage, networking. And that creates silos, because those teams design, the security team designs security products, the storage team designs storage products or storage features, right? And that's how things work. You have to organize some way, by the way. There's pros and cons to every single organizational structure out there, but this is a very common one. Well, it turns out that despite the fact that we view the product as this collection of these features, the user doesn't, right? The user traverses these in a typical scenario. We call them user journeys. And so when you design for these silos, you're not designing for the user journey, and you typically have a very poor, if not broken, user journey. The other problem you have are what I call experience gaps, right? Because when you move from one product area to the other, that wasn't really designed. It was maybe hacked together or thrown together, and sometimes it can be jarring for the user. This is a big problem. I see this at every large major corporation that I talk to, right? It's a challenge. And it's something we've really got to think about, because ultimately, we need to design for how the user experiences the product, not how our organization is structured. So you might see I'm talking about, we're not working on the right things, we're not prioritizing correctly, but isn't that product management's responsibility, right? I assume, I don't want to assume too much, I don't know everything about South Korea, but at least in the US, we tend to think of the triad. We tend to think of engineering, product management, and UX as the three pillars for a product in technology. And product management's role is often to prioritize work, right? They own the success of the product, they get to pick what we work on. But design and engineering should be inputs into that prioritization process. They should inform how product management prioritizes work. And we need to influence correct prioritization. We need to influence to optimize for impact, right? I think this is really critical. And I can tell you that I have not only vertical teams in my organization they're responsible for different product features, but I also have horizontal teams that span multiple product areas. Like I created a team to focus on our platform design system, right? Our design language and reusable components. Well, I have a lot of control over what that team works on and when they work on it. And so I have to put a lot of effort into making sure I'm prioritizing there too. We look very closely at consistency. Consistency tends to be kind of the calling card for UX, right? Make it all consistent. And it turns out in some of our research, consistency is not the #1 priority. Users don't care. They'll buy it anyway. They'll use it anyway, right? Sometimes something else is more important. Do I like consistency? Absolutely. But you have to think in business terms. And the final problem, and possibly the biggest problem, and the one thing I would want you to take away from this talk is we don't think like business owners, and we have to, right? This is critical, very, very critical. Ignore everything else for a moment and imagine that it's your money, not the company's money, your money, right? And if the product fails, you lose everything. Your house, your car, your savings, everything. And then start thinking about how you would structure and try to be successful with that product. When you have to pay for research studies, you have to pay for designers. Would you pay for 10 designers or 1 designer, right? All of a sudden, sometimes when you put yourself in the shoes of the business owner, you think about things differently. And I think that's very, very important. We have to do this. Every single leader I also talked to, especially last year, said this one thing. They said, we still don't have a seat at the table. And I would say, if you really want a seat at the table, stop design thinking. Now don't throw apples at me because, some people get upset when I say that, but stop design thinking and start business thinking, right? When I'm in the meeting with the CEO, when I was in a meeting with our CEO of cloud at Google, every single discussion was about our go-to-market strategy, our competitive differentiation, our profit and loss, what's forcing or what's causing a user to buy our product or not buy our product, right? Because that's what they think about. That's what's important to them. And too often, unfortunately, UX is dismissed as, well, they're idealistic. They just want to make it awesome, but they don't really understand the business and the pressure and the constraints we're under. And if we want that seat at the table, if we want to really argue for our position in leadership on products, we have to think like business owners. We've got to change that perspective. And learn how to measure the ROI of UX. This has been around forever and we're still not doing it well. I remember reading a book, I think it was Randolph Bias. I think he's at the University of Texas, as a matter of fact. And he was a co-author for Measuring the ROI of Usability, I think, if any of you have seen it. That book, I believe it was written maybe 15 years ago. And I don't know any large UX team at any company that does a good job of measuring their ROI. You know what I mean by ROI? Return on investment? In other words, what are we getting for paying for a UX team, right? I mean, people are expensive. It's one of the most expensive costs of the company. I have 320 plus people at Google, and they're highly paid. That's a lot of money. What is Google getting for that, right? What is the return to Google on that investment? You need to think about these things because, again, that pulls you closer to the business, closer to senior executive leadership, and makes your opinion more relevant. So in summary, I think these are three critical things I'd like to see different companies and teams focusing on. I think we've got to work with users more, but we've got to be smart about how we do it. We've got to think about what our goals are and think about how we work with users, but we need to do it more. We don't do it nearly enough. And where I see teams doing it, I see amazing results. We've got to prioritize for impact. Prioritization is probably one of the most important things we can do. We're a limited resource. Design is always, UX is always smaller than it needs to be. If you're working in a company today, in this room, do you have more designers and researchers on your team than you need? Does anyone think that? If you guys say yes, I'm going to freak out. Well, I don't know anyone anywhere who thinks that they have too many people on their team, right? There's always too much work. And that means that we can't do everything. And there may be 20 things that are amazing things we need to do, but we can only do 10. So it doesn't mean the 10 we don't do are not important. It just means at some point we have to make a decision. We can't do 20, right? And that's very, very critical. In fact, that's one of the keys to success. Where I see people succeed is when they're really good at prioritizing what they work on. And then lastly, think like a business owner. I think that's what's missing from the equation, right? That's what's keeping design from being in that executive suite, from having that relevancy to the CEO and to senior leaders. And it just helps you make better decisions about what you're doing. Because if you think like a business owner, you're going to do smarter work, you're going to have more impact to the company that you're working for. Thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, now we will go to the floor for questions and comments.
Okay.
자, 지금부터 질의응답 시간을 갖도록 하겠습니다. 그 시간이 생각보다 여유 있게 남아서 질의응답을 충분히 하실 수 있을 것 같은데 질문이 있으신 분들은 직접 손을 들어서 표시를 해주시거나 아니면 저희 그 학술대회 그 웹사이트 그 키노트 질문란이 있습니다. 지금 화면에 보는 것처럼 질문들을 보내주시면 되겠습니다.
I definitely want to answer the can I visit Google, so we'll get to that one. And if it's not in English, I'm going to have trouble. I can pick one? Just touch it? Oh, just add? Okay. Can I visit Google? Yes. Just don't call me. No. Yes, you can. I have a lot of free time. Look, I would love to have I love when people come visit Google. We actually do tours. Our sites are very interesting, as you might guess, right? And we do tours. We bring specifically candidates in are a big deal. So if you're in Seattle, let me know. Reach out to me and I'll see what I can do. Our site in New York is pretty special. That's a great site to visit. San Francisco is really amazing. Seattle, we're actually building a brand new campus that is going to be just incredible with rooftop walking gardens and all sorts of stuff. So I'll do what I can. How about if I say that? I think Apple is, Apple. Yeah, screw Apple. I don't know. Well, Apple, you know what I would say about Apple? I would say that I mean, they have a very different model from Google, right? Google's model really focuses on open source, flexibility. That's what Android and everything's all about, right? And that has pros and cons. I was talking to someone the other day about this, and because, for example, we make Android, but we don't make many of the phones, we don't really control the overall experience. So I've had people say, oh, Android sucks, but it's really because it's the phone that they have sucks. Or a Chromebook, right? We make Chrome OS, and then someone sells a $100 Chromebook, and they say, wow, Chrome sucks. It's like, well, I mean, it's, so there are pros and cons. We're flexible, we work with a lot of different things, but sometimes we don't control the whole experience, and that can have an impact on us, because people aren't saying the hardware maker sucks, they're saying Chrome sucks. And that's a little dangerous to me, right? Apple, on the other hand, tightens everything down. You have to do it their way or no way, but they do control that entire experience. They have much more control over the whole experience, and that can, in some cases, have a really good result. I don't like how it's hard to use other things with Apple. I don't like that, personally, but I do see their strategy and understand why they do it. Do you see conflict? Oh, what kind of new UX designers are needed these days? I think, we really look for designers and researchers who are good at collaborating, who are humble, who are easier to work with, right? That's a really big factor for us because we focus a lot on culture. But I also look for people who have that practical nature, right? That, like I was talking about, that think about the business, that make smart decisions, that think holistically about a product and what it means to be successful in the market. And that's hard to find. But that's something I definitely look for. How do you persuade the management level regarding your UX strategy? You must provide some actual numbers. You want numbers. Well, so I do a separate talk on sales and how important sales is sometimes a bad word to some people, but I think it's a really important tool for designers in kind of persuading and selling your designs as well as reaching upper management. Last year, let's see, I basically went to our CEO and said, I need 150 new people. No one had ever asked for 150 new UX people at a single time at Google in Google's history, right? And there was a lot of pushback. I was like, I don't know about this, I don't know about that. And what I did was two things. One was, I went and looked, I pulled data on how many designers relative to engineers there were in every other organization at Google, right? I was trying to create a ratio for comparison to what I had. And then I went and I pulled all the numbers we had on customer sat. And I used the customer sat numbers relative to our competition and the ratio of UXers to engineers in my org versus that ratio in other orgs to then convince the CEO that we were way behind and we needed this help to catch up. And she agreed. And she gave me 150 headcount in a single tranche. It was the largest headcount grant in Google's history, I was told, for a single event.
Mr. Wilson, next question is on floor.
Okay.
Hi. So it seems like the user interaction issue is something a lot of people are aware about, but don't really act on. So I was wondering, when you implemented your user recruiter, were there any clear metrics or marks that showed improvement? And in the future, what are further steps you have to improving on this issue, like expanding the recruiter team or implementing new strategy? Are
you saying, I'm sorry, I may have not heard everything, but are you saying like what metrics we use to recruit people.
Or what, have you seen any clear differences in improvement after you implemented the user recruiter? So you said you have a recruiter that recruits users for
Yes.
user testing.
Yes.
And I'm wondering, once you did that, were there any like clear metrics or improvements you saw in?
So how successful has that person been, and how have they impacted our goals and things like that with their recruiting?
Mhm.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So actually, yes, we looked at several metrics like the time it took to recruit, the number of canceled events, because we would basically, we try to get, say, a particular customer to host us, let us come to their site, or to come to our site, and we looked at how many times those were canceled, which the number was really high.
Yeah.
We looked at the time it took from a request for a need to meet with customers to the time that actually happened, and then we compared that to what it was like to have the recruiter helping us, and those numbers went dramatically down, like by I think 200% or something like that,
wow.
because she was so focused on those things specifically that she had a huge impact to helping those metrics.
Cool. All right, thank you.
Yeah, sure.
Mr. Wilson, we have an interesting question. Before last one.
Which one?
Before last one. About Apple.
I think I answered that one. I talked about that one a minute ago. Yeah. How about the second one? Do you see conflicts between Triad, orgs, and Google? How do you resolve it? Absolutely. I totally do. In fact, something that we talked about internally was that it's inconsistent across my organization. So I have teams covering 120 different products, and I have some teams where product management, UX, and engineering work very well together. I mean, they're buddies, they've got it down. And then I have some teams where it's horrible, where product management is toxic to my designers, doesn't involve them, pulls them in at the last minute and says, just go do this, make it look pretty, right? And so we're trying to work across the board to make that relationship more consistent, show the teams where we don't have a good result, the benefits of doing it the right way, because we actually are achieving a lot in these teams that are working really well together. But yeah, it takes education, it takes building trust with these teams, and it's difficult to build trust. There's no shortcut to that. You just have to spend time with people and show them who you are and live up to your word. But yeah, we do a lot of work around that. We're doing a lot of work around that right now to kind of make it a little more consistent across the board.
Question from the floor.
Hi Russ, my name is Harry from Carnegie Mellon. You spoke a little bit about the rift between the idealism in design versus the realism of business. How do you reconcile that in an organization? Do designers need to compromise some of their ideals a little bit to fit with the more real-world constraints, or can they stick to their ideals while delivering on a product that does satisfy the business constraints?
So how do I reconcile kind of idealistic work versus practical work or pragmatic work?
I don't want to pigeonhole design into just being idealistic, but...
I'm sorry, could you speak a little?
Oh, sorry. I don't want to pigeonhole design as being idealistic, but as you referred, design itself it is separated from design. You do need to think a little bit like a business owner, and that's not really what designers normally do in their day-to-day. So how do you reconcile that difference?
Well, you have to remember, so my perspective is coming from running design at a large company, right? There's going to be different contexts. There's going to be contexts where you have, say, an incubator, where you have an innovation-driven, activity, where you have, say, a university environment. Like, different contexts will actually have different, different needs and be different. But in large corporations and large businesses, the bottom line that I see consistently time and time again is just a need to be practical, right? And more pragmatic. I mean, I had I had a meeting with a vice president of product management at Google about 10 days ago, and we were looking at data on, where are we losing customers, where are we gaining customers, and what's affecting those decisions. And consistency was not a factor at all. It just wasn't. We couldn't show any correlation between the product having a consistent user experience and gaining or losing customers, right? And yet there was a strong correlation between certain features and capabilities and performance and stuff like that. So we have to double down on those things because we're trying to drive a business.
So does pragmatism eventually just boil down to prioritization of the user's own priorities versus what designers would normally think?
Pretty much, right? Like we're trying to drive business value. We're trying to win in a competitive market. So again, if you put yourself in those shoes and you say, okay, I've got a product and this person's got a product and we're both competing in the market, how are we going to win, right? And you start really digging into what is going to move the needle, what's going to matter that we can do, and you try to make sure you're not doing the things that won't matter or won't have a big impact.
And that all comes from the user engagement that you were talking about, constant communication with the users and making sure that you know what they want.
We use a lot of user data. We watch behavior patterns in our product, but you have to factor in business strategy, right? You have to factor in, what's our angle at the end of the day? In my case, how is Google Cloud going to differentiate itself from Amazon? What's the difference? And that's a massive factor too in your decision.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are many questions on the screen.
The first one?
Yeah, first one.
Thank you for your speech. You emphasize working with users and also talk lots of us don't meet users. I would like to know how you work with users and how regularly do you meet actual users. So, my favorite thing to do with users actually is observation. I find, because and that's just a personal thing, but I just find there's a lot of things that I see when someone's using a product that they wouldn't express, they wouldn't tell me, right? And, unfortunately, some user meetings can just degrade into either complaint sessions or just asking for a bunch of features, right? So I try, my preferred method or approach is to get into a situation where I can actually observe users using a product or using competitive products. I get a lot out of that. I try to meet with users as much as I can. Not as much as I believe I should, but I'm working on that. But I meet with users maybe, right now, roughly once a month. But I'm not a direct designer either, right? I'm not doing any design work. All I do is stare at spreadsheets these days. And so, but still, I want to have my own personal involvement and understanding and empathy with users too. And so, I join whatever sessions I can.
Yeah. Okay. Last question on the floor. Last question.
Thank you for your wonderful speech today. I'm a student, undergrad student, researching and studying about the virtual reality. And I just got back from the States 2 days ago, and I had a tech tour in California. And I was really surprised that many of the engineers in the field are actually doing the UX and the designing at the same time. And I started to be suspicious about the existence of the UX designer or the designers as well. And I want to hear about your honest opinion in the market, how the portion of the importance between the UX designer and the engineer.
Yeah, so if I heard you correctly, and tell me if I didn't, I see a lot of, I'll hear from a lot of smaller companies who have limited resources. Often they'll say things like, we're looking for T-shaped people, or we're looking for people who can do it all, right? Design, research, the whole thing. We don't do that at Google. We see those as different disciplines, different focuses. So I have an entire research organization and I have a design organization. and they're different functions completely. There's always a unicorn. There's always somebody who can somehow pull it all off, but it's very rare for me to see people combining those skills. I think it's really two different functions. Did that answer the question?
In some way, but I'm more curious about if you have a person who are freshly graduating the school, which skills would you say is more important if the person is capable of doing both UX and the engineering?
Yeah, I'm having a hard time hearing over the mic. Just warning you, you may have to come grab me afterwards. But we invest heavily in research at Google. I've been at companies that didn't, that thought that, we'll just get a lot of designers research, that just slows things down. That's not true at all. We have some amazing researchers. We have a really strong research arm. What I did, the way I organized my team, is I have a collection of units that focus on different product areas, and each one of those has a research manager, and then 1, 2, 3, 5, whatever it is, researchers. And then I have a centralized research team that focuses on quantitative research primarily, but also does some qualitative research that's horizontal across all the products. So I have both. And we have seen just tremendous value coming out of those teams and improvement to what we're doing. All of our research, all the researchers that produce research are required to enter their research studies and reports into a research archive that is available to everybody. And it's a standard format, so we have this process around creating the research, putting it in the archive, it becomes available to everyone, people can search on it, so we have a pretty mature research group. But if I didn't hit what you were asking, just find me afterwards.
I'll do that, thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, time's up. Lunchtime.
Lunchtime.
Yeah. Thank you for your keynote talk, Mr. Wilson. 예, 지금 마치도록 하겠습니다. 큰 박수 부탁드리겠습니다.
네, 중요한 게 남았습니다. 점심시죠. 먹고 살자고 하는 짓인데 저희 나가시면 5층에 쿠폰에 탐나홀이라고 되어 있는데 잘못 기재가 되어 있고요. 5층 탐나홀 바로 준비가 되어 있습니다. 그래서 식권을 미리 뜯으셔서 가시면 빠르게 입장하실 수 있겠습니다. 저는 거기서 다시 한번 이벤트를 진행하도록 하겠습니다. 수고하셨습니다.